remember my first meeting with James Brown. He was from an era where you couldn't do anything big unless you had somebody, probably somebody white, backing you. Yo, is it brother? Who's backing you on this? And I said, well, James, it's just me.
Hi. James Brown erupts outside the South Carolina courthouse because he's been forbidden to drive. His license suspended after arrest for driving under the influence of PCP.
Don Cornelius banned James Brown from Soul Train after this happened.
It resulted, as a matter of fact, in Brown his wife with a lead pipe and firing a gun at a car that she was in. These are charges that Brown denies.
High on PCP and consumed by jealousy, Brown couldn't handle seeing another black man succeed without white backing.
And then he passed by me again and say, brother, who you with on this? I wanted to say, you just asked me that, but out of respect, I would say, James, it's just me. And then came to me and he said, brother, who's really behind this? And I said, James, it's just me.
His erratic behavior would escalate so badly that Don Cornelius would eventually ban the Godfather of Soul from Soul Train forever, ending one of the most important relationships in black entertainment history. So, let's get into it. When James Brown walked into the Soul Train studio in 1973, he expected to see white executives running the show. Instead, he found Don Cornelius owning everything without any white backing. For Brown, this was impossible to understand.
I don't want nobody to give me nothing.
Brown had spent decades fighting white record executives who controlled his career. He understood the music business as black talent performing, while white businessmen collected profits. Seeing someone completely bypass this system challenged everything he believed about black business in America.
Studio, is it brother? Who's backing you on this? And I said, well, James, it's just me.
Cornelius had started Soul Train in 1970 with $400 of his own money and built it into a nationally syndicated show reaching millions of viewers. This represented everything Brown claimed to want for black America. True independence without white control. But instead of celebrating another black man's success, Brown saw it as competition. Brown had tried to achieve independence through James Brown Enterprises, but never reached Cornelius's level of control and ownership. Brown's business ventures always depended on white distribution networks and venues. He had financial success, but never true independence, like what Cornelius displayed so casually. The show's success represented proof that black people could own their platforms, control their narrative, and build sustainable businesses without white intervention. This should have inspired Brown, who had recorded "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud," and positioned himself as a leader in black consciousness.
And then he passed by me again and say, brother, who you with on this? I wanted to say, you just asked me that, but out of respect, I would say, James, it's just me. And then came to me and he said, brother, who's really behind this? And I said, James, it's just me.
Brown's repeated questioning revealed his inability to accept that another black man had achieved what he had always talked about, but never accomplished. His disbelief was rooted in his own failures to break free from white control. Instead of learning from Cornelius, Brown chose to view him as competition. This competitive mindset revealed the limitations of Brown's Black Power rhetoric. He talked about black pride and independence, but couldn't handle seeing another black man actually living those principles successfully. His ego couldn't accept that someone else might have greater influence over black culture. The irony was devastating. Here was James Brown, supposedly a leader in black consciousness, unable to recognize and celebrate genuine black achievement when it was standing right in front of him. His reaction showed that his commitment to black empowerment was secondary to his need to be the most important black man in any room. This jealousy would poison every interaction they had. Brown couldn't accept Cornelius as an equal because doing so would force him to confront his own failures. Instead of supporting another black pioneer, Brown saw him as an obstacle to his ego and influence. James Brown turned every Soul Train appearance into a power struggle. While other artists followed the format and respected Cornelius's vision, Brown constantly pushed boundaries and made unreasonable demands that turned every booking into a negotiation. Brown was notorious for his perfectionism and control throughout the music industry. He maintained one of the largest touring operations in entertainment, employing 50 people for the James Brown Review. His shows were precisely choreographed where band members could be fined for missed notes or wrinkled costumes. This control extended to every aspect of his career. Brown insisted on specific lighting setups, demanded multiple sound checks, and required rehearsal time that other artists didn't need. Venues tolerated these demands because his performances were legendary, but Soul Train operated under different constraints. Cornelius had developed a format that worked. Artists performed their hits, did brief interviews, and left. The operation moved smoothly because everyone respected the structure. Brown's first appearance in 1973 established a pattern of behavior that would define all his visits. He arrived with his full band, the JBs, making them the only live musicians in the show's history. While this showed Brown's musical excellence, it also revealed his inability to adapt to someone else's vision. During the taping, Brown dominated every segment, going longer than typical guests. Brown used the platform for political statements about black education and social issues that weren't aligned with Soul Train's family-friendly image. While his passion was admirable, his inability to respect the show's format created production challenges that other artists didn't cause. Behind the scenes, Brown's demands became increasingly difficult to accommodate. He wanted longer performance segments, more interview time, and creative input into how his appearances were edited. These requests went beyond what other guests expected and created extra work for production teams.
And if you don't have certain things at certain times, support from people, and you're gonna have to face it. So I faced it, but I enjoyed it.
Brown's behavior reflected his inability to be a supporting player in anyone else's production. Throughout his career, he had been the undisputed star of every show. The idea of sharing spotlight or following someone else's creative vision was foreign to his experience. Other TV shows learned to work around Brown's demanding personality because his talent made the effort worthwhile. But Soul Train was different. It didn't need Brown more than he needed the platform. Cornelius was building something larger than any individual artist. By the early 80s, James Brown's personal life had deteriorated into a destructive spiral that made him unsuitable for mainstream television. His addiction to PCP and cocaine, combined with financial pressure and declining record sales, transformed him from musical legend into dangerous liability. Brown's drug problems escalated dramatically during the 1980s as various stresses mounted. Former associates revealed he had developed a fondness for PCP, which he nicknamed Gorilla, and would smoke it until supplies became difficult to obtain. When PCP wasn't available, he switched to mixed with tobacco in cool cigarettes. The drug use coincided with serious financial troubles that threatened everything Brown had built. The IRS was pursuing him for millions in back taxes. His record sales had declined significantly, and his expensive lifestyle created constant cash flow problems. Brown's response was to increase drug use rather than address underlying issues. The violence in Brown's personal life became impossible to ignore. Between 1987 and 1995, he was arrested 4 times on charges of his third wife, Adrienne Rodriguez. These weren't minor disputes. Rodriguez reported that Brown had beaten her with an iron pipe and fired a gun at her car. The pattern of abuse wasn't limited to Rodriguez. Brown had a documented history of violence against women stretching back decades, including allegations involving singer Tammy Terrell in the 1960s when she was 17. His violent tendencies intensified with drug use and stress, creating dangerous combinations.
It resulted, as a matter of fact, in Brown his wife with a lead pipe and firing a gun at a car that she was in. These are charges that Brown denies.
The 1988 CNN interview became legendary for all the wrong reasons. When confronted with serious criminal charges, including attempted murder, Brown responded by singing his hit songs and claiming nothing was wrong. This wasn't poor media training. It was evidence of someone whose judgment had been severely compromised. For Cornelius and Soul Train, Brown's escalating problems created an impossible situation. The show had built its reputation on presenting positive images of black culture and family-friendly entertainment. Booking an artist facing domestic violence and weapons charges would contradict everything Soul Train represented. The entertainment industry was becoming more conscious of domestic violence issues during the 1980s. Brown's refusal to acknowledge his problems or show remorse made the situation worse. Instead of seeking help, he denied everything and acted like the charges were insignificant distractions. His bizarre responses during interviews showed he was either unwilling or unable to engage with serious situations professionally. The combination of drug abuse, violent behavior, and complete lack of accountability made him unsuitable for the wholesome image Soul Train had cultivated. James Brown's massive ego and inability to treat others as equals systematically destroyed his professional relationships throughout the entertainment industry. His attitude toward Cornelius was just one example of a broader pattern that alienated collaborators and business partners who could have supported his career.
We welcome you, James Brown. How did all of this trouble begin?
Living in America.
Brown's grandiose sense of importance was evident in every public statement during the 1970s and 1980s. He positioned himself as more than an entertainer. He was a cultural leader, business visionary, and voice for Black America. While some claims had merit, his inability to acknowledge others' achievements made collaboration impossible. The 1973 Soul Train interview captured Brown's ego-driven worldview when he announced he was getting out of the business to focus on Black education. This was typical Brown behavior, making grandiose announcements about altruistic plans while implicitly criticizing everyone else's work as less important. These statements reflected Brown's genuine belief that everything he did was inherently more significant than anyone else's efforts. He consistently overpromised on various schemes, announcing ambitious plans that rarely materialized. His tendency to make dramatic proclamations without following through damaged his credibility. Brown's relationship with Cornelius suffered because he couldn't accept that someone else might have greater influence over Black culture and entertainment. Soul Train's success threatened Brown's self-perceived position as the ultimate authority on Black consciousness and artistic achievement.
I'm kind of a final for James Brown. As far as a one-night engagement is concerned, I'm pretty well getting out of the business. But I'm going into something that I think can be far more valuable to the community.
This statement perfectly encapsulated Brown's fundamental problem with ego and self-importance. He couldn't appear as a guest without positioning his work as far more valuable than what his host was doing. This backhanded insult was typical of his interactions with other successful Black entertainers. Brown's ego prevented him from acknowledging Cornelius's remarkable achievements in building a media empire from nothing. Instead of recognizing Soul Train as a valuable platform for promoting Black music and culture, Brown viewed it as competition for his influence and authority. The music industry was full of stories about Brown's inability to maintain long-term relationships with collaborators, band members, and business partners. His need to be the center of attention and refusal to share credit destroyed countless professional opportunities throughout his career. This pattern extended beyond music to his relationships with television shows, concert promoters, and media outlets. Brown wanted to use these platforms to amplify his message and boost his career, but couldn't respect the format or creative vision that made these ventures successful. The tragedy was that Brown's relationship with Soul Train represented a missed opportunity for mutual benefit. Cornelius had created exactly the kind of black-owned platform that Brown claimed to champion. Instead of supporting it, his ego turned potential alliance into conflict. The September 1988 incident that resulted in James Brown's imprisonment became the final chapter in his transformation from cultural icon to dangerous outcast. His drug-fueled rampage involving shotguns and high-speed chases demonstrated that he had become too unstable for any responsible entertainment venue to book. The incident began when Brown attended a business meeting at his own office building while under the influence of PCP and carrying a loaded shotgun. According to police reports, Brown became agitated when seminar attendees complained about restroom facilities. His response was to brandish the weapon and make threatening statements.
Right. James Brown erupts outside the South Carolina courthouse because he's been forbidden to drive. His license suspended after arrest for driving under the influence of PCP.
When police arrived, Brown fled in his pickup truck, leading them on a two-state chase reaching speeds of 100 miles per hour. During the pursuit, officers fired multiple shots at Brown's vehicle while he continued driving recklessly through populated areas, endangering innocent bystanders. The chase ended when Brown's truck, with flattened tires from police gunfire, crashed into a ditch near Augusta, Georgia. Approximately 20 officers responded where they arrested Brown and discovered PCP in his bloodstream. The incident resulted in charges for assault, weapons violations, drug possession, and reckless endangerment. Brown's version of events, detailed in FBI files released in 2007, claimed police used excessive force and shot at his vehicle without provocation. However, the presence of PCP in his system and his documented history of drug-fueled violent behavior undermined his account's credibility.
Now, your fans will have read all about this, James. Aren't you concerned about that?
No, I'm concerned because there's nothing wrong.
And what are you going to say to your fans when they ask you some questions about it?
I'm going to say I feel good. Papa's got a brand new bag. It's a man's world.
This response to serious questions about criminal charges that could have resulted in decades in prison revealed the extent of Brown's disconnection from reality. His inability to engage with consequences or respond appropriately to legal jeopardy showed someone whose mental state had deteriorated beyond normal interaction. The violent incident wasn't isolated, but rather the culmination of escalating behavior throughout the 1980s. Brown's drug use, domestic violence, and financial problems had created a perfect storm of instability that made him dangerous to everyone around him. For Cornelius and Soul Train, the 1988 incident made any future association with Brown completely impossible. The family-oriented program had built success on presenting positive role models and celebrating Black achievement. Brown's association with violence, drugs, and criminal behavior contradicted everything the show represented. The incident marked the beginning of the end for Brown's mainstream entertainment career. While he continued touring after his 1991 prison release, his reputation never recovered. Television shows, major venues, and corporate sponsors became reluctant to associate with someone whose behavior was unpredictable and dangerous. The entertainment industry's response reflected broader changes in how the business dealt with artists who had serious personal issues. The days when talent alone could overcome personal dysfunction were ending, replaced by corporate approaches prioritizing risk management over artistic achievement. James Brown's banishment from Soul Train during his final decades represents one of entertainment's most tragic falls from grace. The man who revolutionized popular music and created entire genres ended up excluded from the platform that celebrated Black musical excellence, not because of industry racism, but because of his own destructive choices. Brown's contributions to music and culture remain undeniable regardless of his personal failures. He created funk music from nothing, transforming rhythm and blues into something completely new that influenced every form of popular music that followed. His innovations in rhythm, spectacular live performances, and role in breaking racial barriers paved the way for generations of artists. His early Soul Train appearances during the show's formative years helped establish its credibility and brought mainstream attention to black music at crucial times. Brown's presence validated Cornelius's vision and demonstrated that Soul Train could attract the biggest names in black entertainment. However, Brown's personal demons and character flaws ultimately overshadowed his artistic genius and destroyed his ability to maintain professional relationships. The same intensity, perfectionism, and need for control that made him a great performer also made him impossible to work with as he descended into addiction and violence. His treatment of women, drug abuse, violent outbursts, and complete refusal to take responsibility created a pattern of behavior that no responsible entertainment venue could ignore. The family-friendly image that Soul Train had cultivated was completely incompatible with Brown's chaotic personal life and criminal behavior. Cornelius had built Soul Train as a celebration of black culture, achievement, and positive role models for young viewers. The show's success depended on maintaining its reputation for wholesome entertainment. As Brown's behavior became increasingly erratic and violent, Cornelius had no choice but to distance the show from someone whose actions contradicted its core values. The decision to effectively ban Brown from Soul Train was undoubtedly painful for Cornelius, who had witnessed Brown's genius firsthand and understood his importance to black music history. But as a responsible businessman and television producer, Cornelius couldn't allow personal admiration for Brown's talent to override obligations to viewers and the broader Soul Train community. The tragedy of Brown's exclusion was that it came when he most needed the platform Soul Train could have provided. His career was in serious decline, his personal life was in shambles, and his reputation was being destroyed by criminal charges and bizarre behavior. Soul Train could have been a vehicle for redemption if Brown had been capable of personal growth and accountability. Instead, Brown chose to maintain destructive patterns rather than seek help or make necessary changes to repair relationships and rebuild his career. His refusal to acknowledge problems, get treatment for addictions, or take responsibility for violent behavior made it impossible for anyone to work with him professionally. Brown's story serves as a powerful reminder that talent alone isn't sufficient for sustained success. Personal character, professional behavior, and the ability to maintain healthy relationships are equally important factors determining whether someone can build and maintain a successful career over time. The contrast between Brown's early Soul Train appearances when he was at his peak and his later exclusion tells the story of his entire career trajectory. From groundbreaking artistic achievement and cultural influence, he descended into self-inflicted chaos and isolation through choices that destroyed everything he had built. While James Brown's musical legacy remains secure and his influence on popular culture continues, his personal legacy serves as a cautionary tale about the price of unchecked ego, untreated addiction, and refusing to take responsibility for one's actions. His banishment from Soul Train wasn't the result of external barriers, but the inevitable consequence of his own destructive behavior. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye!